All right. So we're on the air live, and it's Collin Castellaw, and we're excited to have the shot mechanics expert. So, Collin, how you doing this evening?
Doing pretty good. Doing pretty good. How about yourself?
Yeah, doing great. Hey, thanks so much for joining us tonight. We got a lot of ballers that are really excited about what you have to say. And you are an expert when it comes to shooting and shooting mechanics. But before we dive into that, I'd love to get a sense of your background. Where did your love of hoops originate? Take us back.
For sure. So I was born in 1986. So as I got kind of older, I was kind of that 90s baby. So that was in the kind of the heart of the NBA, right after kind of the Magic, Larry Bird revolution. So I had, like the Reggie Millers, the Michael Jordans. That's kind of when I really first kind of fell in love with basketball. And it was probably about first grade was when I really started to play a lot and kind of decided like, this is something that I love and that I want to do forever. And then so kind of from there, that's kind of where the love first started, was about first grade. And it kind of happened just from playing at like recess, watching NBA games. I got a good buddy named James Bennett. Shouts to you, James, who in first grade was the best player in the entire Valley. And so at recess, we'd play like 1-on-3. It'd be James versus like three of us, and he'd beat us every single time. And so kind of that love started from watching the NBA and then also trying to beat James as the recesses went on.
Yeah, very cool, very cool. Well, as many of our viewers may know, Davion is not with us tonight. He is in China, making it happen with our manufacturers and our partners. Just a little bit about me. I'm Bruce Yanni. I'm the co-founder of a Shot Tracker, and like Collin, we are just basketball enthusiasts and lovers. So love the game, love all aspects of the game. We created Shot Tracker for all of you to help improve, and we just have this adage that you cannot improve what you don't measure. Collin, what do you think about that?
For sure, man. I think that's something that's really, really important. And one thing that in my own personal playing career, growing up in the time that I did, it was really pre-analytics. AAU was a thing, but it wasn't really what it is now. And training and training programs didn't really exist like they do now as well. So generally when we'd go to work out back in the day, in high school, junior high, that sort of thing, we wouldn't really know what we were doing. We'd kind of get up some shots here, get up some shots there, didn't keep track of percentages, didn't keep track of how many we shot or whatever, just kind of like, go in the gym and try to get some shots up. And I can imagine how much better I would have been and how much better my teammates would have been and friends would have been if we would have had some sort of tool to kind of track how good we were getting, where we were getting better at, where we were still struggling at, because it was really just kind of a guessing game back then, which made it really, really tough. So that's one reason why I kind of wanted to partner with you guys in Shot Tracker, is just because I think it helps kind of decloud a lot of the stuff that kids go through, especially in their kind of, elementary, junior high, early high school years. So I love the product just for that alone.
Well, that you said it. You were kind of coming onto the basketball scene, developing your love of the sport, pre-analytics. Nowadays, it's all about analytics and measuring, which is great because as a baller, you always know exactly where you stand and where you need to improve on. Let's go back to when you were a young baller. We have viewers from all ages tonight at every level of the game. But one aspect that we all share in common is we all started out in grade school hoops. Sure. Tell us what it was like in middle school, junior high. Were you getting looks? Were you getting recruited? Was it about going to, how'd you get to high school? Did you attend the public high school in your area? Take us through that and how your love of the game developed.
For sure. So I grew up in a town called Clarkson, Washington. It's on Eastern Washington, Washington State, that is. So a lot of people they think Washington and they think Seattle, Tacoma, Olympia. Eastern Washington is not like that. Eastern Washington is much more rural, wheat fields, farming, all that sort of stuff. So I grew up in a pretty small town over there. And so generally like AAU that we played was just with like the same kids in our grade, and we'd go to a few tournaments here and there. And really that kind of recruiting monster didn't exist like it does today. There might be like, in our area, there might be like one kind of select team that would maybe play one tournament at the end of the year, but it wasn't like we were going to Seattle showcases and Las Vegas showcases and, all the stuff that they have now. So I think it was good and bad at the time. I think it was bad in the sense where, recruiting and exposure was a lot harder, but I think it was good in the sense that it kept all of our teammates together. We didn't all play on a bunch of different select club teams. So as we went through junior high and high school, we stayed as one cohesive unit, and we're able to be pretty good because of that. So growing up in Eastern Washington might be a little bit different than, if you're growing up in a metropolitan area for the most part, just because AAU wasn't the beast that it is now. We maybe play 4 tournaments in the summer, maybe 5, whereas now kids will join the select teams, the club teams, and they'll play, pretty much all summer long. It really wasn't like that back then. So, it was a little bit different.
Well, we're going to get into the tips of shooting, and we're going to get into, a bit about shot mechanics. But before we do that, tell us and our viewers, what aspects of the game were important to you when you were a freshman, when you were that sophomore sensation. Tell us about your first experience in the varsity, and when did the shot become important to you, and what mechanics were you working on at that time?
For sure. Really glad that you asked that too, because there's a lot of misconception out there. So growing up, I was always a pretty good shooter. And part of it was because I played a ton. I shot the way that was comfortable for me. Everything was smooth. And so growing up through like elementary school, junior high, I was always one of the best shooters on the court. Had no conscience, would put it up anytime I wanted to. And then that kind of transferred over into early high school as well, which was great. And you kind of mentioned the sophomore sensation thing. So my freshman year, we all stuck together. All the freshmen stayed on the same team. And then my sophomore year is when you kind of go for JV or varsity or whatever you're trying to make. And so I was initially put on the JV squad, and I was the 9th man on the JV rotation. They had some juniors that were a year older than me and were getting more playing time. And so I was the 9th man on the team, but I was either the first or the second leading scorer on the JV squad because I came in and would try to fill it up. I
love it. The man off the bench. With the
exactly. I was like Jamal Crawford before Jamal Crawford was Jamal Crawford.
You told him how to do that, right?
Exactly. So, sophomore year, I was kind of the 9th man off the bench, still trying to get buckets. And we had a kid who was a year older than me named Josh Heitvelt, who got a ton of D1 like major looks. So like Roy Williams came and watched a few games. He was recruited by, North Carolina, Kansas, pretty much all the big ones. And he ended up going to Gonzaga. So he's 6'10", had a 40-inch vertical, really long, could jump out of the gym, pretty much just dominant. And so all the teams that the varsity was playing, they double, triple, quadruple team him. And we didn't have very many great shooters on the varsity. So I kind of got my shot because he was getting triple teamed. And they were like, we need somebody to go stand in the corner and knock down some threes. So I got moved up on the varsity. I went from the 9th man on JV to probably about the 6th man on varsity, just to kind of stretch the floor a little bit. And they hid me in the zone because I was like I want to say I was about 5'9" and about 125 or 130 soaking wet. So I was a pretty small player playing on varsity as a sophomore. And then so I got moved up.
The first game that you had, and how many points did you knock down as a sophomore?
I want to say it was 13 or 16 or something like that in the first game that I had. And it was hilarious because, I was nervous, had butterflies in the stomach, had no idea what I was going to do, didn't even really know some of their offenses and stuff. So I got moved up. We were playing Shadle Park in Spokane because we played in the GSL, which is a big Spokane league there, the same town that Gonzaga's in. And so they put me in the game. And the very first shot I hit was the first one I took. And because we went in and I didn't know what play we were running, so I just went and stood in the corner, and it was an inbounds play. And for some reason, the other team didn't see me check in, and they didn't see, somehow nobody guarded me. So I was just standing in the corner wide open, just clapped for the ball, caught it in the corner, let it fly. And it kind of like the confidence just went from there. So I let it fly that first game a little bit, and then kind of continued on throughout the sophomore season there. It was a good one.
That's great. Now, this 6'10" guy that went and played for Gonzaga, did he graduate that next year when you became a junior?
Yes, for sure. So I was a sophomore and he was a junior that year. So the next year we still had him. So I was a junior when he was a senior. And then this is kind of where the story gets a little bit murky for me. So I got moved up on the varsity to be the shooter, to knock down shots. And so that's basically how I train. That's how I practice. I'd go to the gym with my dad, and I just get up rep after rep after rep after rep, just catch and shoot from the corner, from the wings, basically the same shots that I was getting.
How many shots? I'm curious. How many shots would you and your dad put up when you guys went to the gym together?
It just kind of depended. A lot of times it would depend on how much time we had. It would depend on how well I was shooting. You know, I'd like to do the make 10 in a row before we leave thing. And then sometimes that would be fast. Sometimes that would be slow. But the biggest mistake that I made was that I developed myself into a one-dimensional player. I developed myself to only being the guy who can catch and shoot if he's got a lot of time off on the shot. Because my kind of thinking was, if I can knock down open shots, I'll get to play as long as I want to play, which unfortunately is not true as you move up in levels, because guys get faster, you know, defenses fly around, guys are longer, they're taller, they're more explosive. So really just being that one-dimensional player kind of came back to bite me in the behind a little bit, because by the time, you know, our junior season ended and we were moving into summer ball, the 6'10" kid graduated, he moved on to Gonzaga, and now I developed myself into a one-dimensional shooter that couldn't do anything else. You know, and so I had to figure out something else on the fly. And that's kind of one of the reasons why I ended up starting shot mechanics down the line, was to help players, you know, kind of focus on shooting, because it's super, super important, but more as a scoring role rather than just a catch and shoot role.
Okay, now this is important. I think this marks a transition here in our conversation tonight. So you got developed yourself into a one-dimensional player, hitting open knockdown shots. What are the now, what advice can you give our viewers and ballers today about developing into a multi-dimensional player, developing their shot so that it's more than just an open knockdown shot? I think this is important for our viewers tonight.
For sure. When I talk about shooting, I like to talk a lot about transitions. So how the ball transitions from different points of your body into your shot. So if all you do is just rep out catch and shoot jumpers over and over again, you're definitely going to be able to hit catch and shoot jumpers. But if the pass is a little high, if it's a little low, if it's to the left, if it's to the right, if your body's turned, you know, these are all things that if you haven't practiced the transitions from different points, it's probably going to throw off your shot. And because, you know, shooting is a game of inches. You know, a miss versus a make could be a half an inch or a minor tweak in your mechanics. And so if you haven't practiced those different transitions, when you go to shoot them in a game, if your release is just this much too low, or, you know, this much too high, or this much to the left, it might be a small tweak on the release, but by the time the ball gets to the basket, it's going to have big time results. So it's really kind of shooting out of those transitions that I like to talk about. So when I'm working with players, I have them work on different body positions, whether it be facing away from the hoop, towards the hoop, feet turned, feet split stance, catching out of a hop, catching out of a 1-2, catching, bouncing off of 1 foot, just all the sorts of different type of movements that you're going to be doing in a game to get more shots. Because, you know, if you're one-dimensional, just catch and shoot player, you might get 2, 3, 4 shots a game. And if you hit 3 of them, pretty much your ceiling is that you're going to average about 9 points a game. Which is where I had developed myself into, was I would hit pretty much every shot I took, but I could never average double digits, because then the other teams know that you're a shooter. They're going to cover you. And so that's kind of where my development took that swing in the opposite direction, kind of be a scoring shooter rather than just a quote unquote shooter.
Sure. And so you know, I understand that you evaluate NBA players all day. So what I'm sure our viewers want to know are, what are the 3 things that NBA players who are good shooters do? For sure.
You know, my stance on shooting a lot of the times, especially mechanics related, is that there's no one size fits all instruction when it comes to shooting. And I think that's where a lot of shooting coaches miss the boat. And one reason why shot mechanics, I think, has been really successful is because we don't come at it in as an approach of you have to do this, 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 and this. Instead, it's a what's causing your misses, you know, and how can we fix that as easy as possible? So there's a lot of things that a lot of coaches will tell you that are wrong that aren't necessarily wrong. So a lot of the stuff that you see NBA guys do are things like having their feet turned. So being 10 toes square to the basket is something that really doesn't work for very many players. I had a lot of struggles when I was a junior in high school, because I had a coach that really preached 10 toes to the rim and wouldn't let me shoot unless I had them. And so if your 10 toes go to the rim, your chicken wing starts coming out, and I had a lot of issues with the chicken wing. And it wasn't until I was in college that I just went back to kind of when I was younger, shooting what felt naturally, because I didn't have somebody who was specifically telling me how to shoot that way. And I started to hit a lot more shots. So there's a lot of things like that, like, you know, 10 toes to the rim is something that's kind of, you know, works for some people, but for most people not. You know, shooting with a ball dip where you catch and bring the ball down for a second, I think is really, really good for a lot of shooters. That was something that got really, really popular when I was older, that, you know, you weren't supposed to shoot with a dip, but really, you know, It doesn't slow your shot down. All the science and stuff that I've done behind it and the research shows that it's pretty much the exact same speed, and really it helps your mechanics a lot. Like, I think of it like a golf swing. So if you're trying to hit a golf ball, and if you just start with your club up here, it's really hard to generate that momentum to go through the basketball and hit a long distance. And it dips kind of the same way as you catch the ball. If you go straight up with it, it can work, especially if you're a bigger, stronger athlete. But if you're a younger player, or maybe somebody who doesn't have, the pipes like I got here.
Those are pretty good guns. You better put that away unless you got.
I know, right? I got to get permits for those. But if you get a little dip, that gives you that up force, that momentum, that rhythm into your jumper, and kind of get the ball towards the hoop. So you'll notice that a lot of NBA players dip off of the catch. Ray Allen's one of them. Kyrie Irving, Steph Curry. Klay Thompson does every now and again. But I think Klay's to the point of his career where he's such a good shooter, he needs to work on that next phase, and shooting without a dip's probably that for him.
One of our viewers tonight, Jordan Trey Boyd, I'm going to incorporate questions.
I know Jordan.
Yeah,
What's up, Jay?
So he wants to know, in your opinion, who you think the top 5 shooters are in the NBA.
Top 5 shooters. All right, so you got to go with Curry. I mean, the tear that he's on is unbelievable. Then I would go with Klay. Klay's my guy. I went to Washington State University for college, which is where Klay went. And I think we missed each other by 1 year. So I got to go with Klay at number 2. After that, kind of like I talked about before, I like shooters that can shoot out of any situation, not just catch and shoot guys. So I like Kyrie Irving's jump shot a lot. I like Kevin Durant's jump shot a lot. Let's see here. We need one more. Who else do I really like? I think there's a few up and coming dudes, kind of younger guys that are getting into the league. I'm drawing a blank for my 5th spot here. I'm blanking on a 5th one.
All right, well, that's okay. We'll move on. If that comes back, you can we'll surface that one if you can think of the 5th one.
Okay.
From one of our viewers, it's I2440G asks, what's typically different between NBA players shooting form and WNBA players shooting form? Oh,
very interesting question. It's interesting. I think a big difference is that a lot of NBA players shoot how is comfortable for them, and I think a lot of WNBA players shoot how they were taught. And it kind of goes back to that misinformation that I talked about earlier, where feet square to the rim, no dipping. A lot of that sort of stuff I see in WNBA players and I see in the women's game, versus where in the men's game you don't see as much of that stuff. And I think it has to do with maybe, as a guy's growing up shooting, I don't know. So I used to coach and teach high school and junior high, and there's a big difference between coaching boys and girls. Girls are very attentive. They listen to everything that you say and follow it to a T, which is awesome. Boys are kind of like, yeah, I'll try, like, well, whatever. And then they go and do their own thing a lot of the times. And I think sometimes in shooting, that's actually helpful because if you're shooting how you're comfortable, generally that's going to give you better results than if you're trying to force yourself into a cookie cutter mold, which I think a lot of women do, unfortunately. So something like dipping the ball is really, really useful for extra power, extra range, extra rhythm. And that's something that I see missing in a lot of WNBA shooters form, and especially a lot of junior high and high school girls as well. So it's kind of interesting just the different dynamics of boys and girls, and how sometimes I think maybe that misinformation might kind of creep into the girls' game a little bit more.
That is interesting because there's different learning dynamics between guys and girls, as you've mentioned, seen it before many times. The girls seem to really try and implement what they're taught, and
for sure,
guys just kind of wing it, which really I think parlays nicely into another question we have from G Snail. Asks, is there a perfect shot, or can you have an ugly shot and still be a great shooter?
Absolutely. I am 100% in the mode of, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. That's my number one advice when it comes to shooting. I think a lot of coaches are tinkerers by trade. They like tinkering. They like trying to, kind of put their stamp on stuff. And so the number one thing that I see is kids are hitting shots. They got a great shot. And then at some point somebody tells them, your elbow looks kind of funny that way. You should do it this way. And then they try to practice their way out of it. But if it ain't broke, don't fix it. If it looks funky, that doesn't really matter. Basketball is a results-driven thing. That's why guys like Kevin Martin, who's got that super funky kind of bring it up the left side of his body shot. he hits shots, he doesn't need to change it. So I don't think there's a perfect shot, quote unquote. I mean, there's things that mechanics look good and can optimize and give you better chances of hitting shots. But with that being said, I think everybody's got their own perfect shot. My perfect shot's not going to be your perfect shot. It's not going to be Jordan Trey Boyd's perfect shot. And I think that's one really big difference in shooting instruction that's kind of changing recently, especially with the dialogue that shot mechanics has started, where it's all about hitting shots. So we want to find out what's causing you to miss shots and then fix that.
Yeah, that's outstanding, and it's quite a bit different thinking than before. Before it seemed like there was only one way to shoot, and
sure.
Not all the advice that coaches gave throughout people's careers and are giving today to young ballers is necessarily the right advice. So many
Sure.
people are seeking that, and fortunately we have these tools available so that we can connect with great shooting coaches such as yourself, so that you can spread the word on how to get the most out of your shooting as possible. Want to read another question. This is from Jay Weiss, who puts off an awful lot of shots on Shot Tracker. We really appreciate him dearly. He's always up high on the leaderboards. And Jay Weiss says, my coach back in the 80s said he'd bench anyone who shot from over 15 feet and missed. It shut down the offense. And so the question is, what's the right advice for coaches to give to have productive shooters?
All right, so I mean that's kind of classic old school coaching, where the jumpers, something that we don't want to do, and my coach had like a green light, red light system. So either you had the green light or you had the red light, which worked pretty well for the most part, because confidence is huge when it comes to shooting. I would say that, mechanics and confidence in tandem are probably two of the most important aspects when it comes to hitting shots. And so, to be a coach and be able to take the reins off, you have to feel comfortable with it, and so you have to see it first in practice, I think. And where a lot of coaches kind of miss the boat is they're very instant gratification. You know what I mean? This missed shot is bad, and so I want to bench you because of it. But instead, I mean, when I used to coach, I'd have players, if they missed a 25-footer, if it looked close and it looked good, like, I didn't have a problem with it, because number one, that made the defense respect him, and they're going, if this kid's pulling a 25-footer, like, odds are he can probably shoot. So I think there's kind of this change in mindset that's going on, and especially I think the NBA is helping it, and the Golden State Warriors are helping it, and the Spurs are helping it, where it kind of works in the NBA and trickles its way down, that shooting is important, and just because you're shooting a lot of threes doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. Just because you're missing a lot of threes doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. There's that kind of old saying, you live by the three, you die by the three. But if you have the optimized mechanics and you get up a lot of shots, you'll probably live by the three a lot more than you'll die by the three. So that's just kind of how I don't know, see that going down.
Well, I think that's pretty sage. And in terms of shot mechanics, and it's great that the NBA is starting to say, hey, the shot's important. And it's, when you got a player like Steph, who's not an overly big man and a giant out on the court, who's got the smoothest shot, it really starts to refocus our attention back on the fundamentals. And so many people like Kobe and others and college coaches are speaking about fundamentals. So, back to shot mechanics, just for a quick sec. One of our viewers, Jonathan Anakwe, asks, what is the most common error that you correct with a player's shot?
So I would say by far the number one thing that I see most often that's really, for me, is one of the worst things that, as far as like affecting your shooting percentage, is a low release angle. So a lot of it comes from players being younger, junior high, early high school, elementary school, and trying to shoot from range without optimized mechanics. So, shooting 10 toes to the rim, not dipping the ball. And so they try to get that extra force, and their release comes out really flat. And what I mean by a flat release is, as you release the ball, anything with your elbow lower than your eye is going to be considered a pretty flat trajectory. And really, if you think about it, it's just physics. If you shoot a ball that's flat, it sees a smaller surface area of the rim, and so you have a smaller margin of error. So by far, that's the number one thing. I would say probably 60 to 70% of kids that I watch their jumpers and break them down have too flat of a release, and thus they miss a lot of shots. And what's nice is it's a super, super easy release. Just getting your elbow above your eye is the number one thing to optimize that arc. And then your target is no longer seen like a sliver like that. Now it's seeing a bigger target like that, so it's got more surface area for the ball to hit.
Well, I know that Jonathan would really appreciate that advice. So hopefully, that really brings home from him and his shot and his arc in that shot. So
for sure, when in doubt, think elbow above the eye. When in doubt.
I like it. That's pretty significant. So really like shot mechanics, just the site, the programs you developed, just real quick, tell our viewers what that's all about.
Yeah, for sure. So once I got out of college, I was looking for something to kind of relay the shooting information that I kind of stumbled across it by accident. The very first, I was a JV high school basketball coach at a tiny, tiny town called Colton, Washington. They have like, I want to say 16 kids per graduating class or something like that. Maybe even 10 kids per graduating class. And so it was an interesting dynamic because a lot of the kids hadn't had coaching before. A lot of them hadn't practiced shooting before. And so I found out that by doing very small tweaks that you kind of personalize athlete to athlete, they saw really, really big improvements pretty fast. And that's kind of where shot mechanics started was, this idea of not everybody has to shoot the same. Not everybody's going to have the exact same mechanics, but instead, what do you need to do individually to hit more shots? And then so from there, I just kind of started the online stuff, started doing a YouTube channel, just kind of conveying the importance of shooting mechanics. And not only that, but more the problem-solving process of finding what works best for players. So yeah, I got a website, shotmechanics.com. The YouTube channel is youtube.com/shotmechanics, where we have a really growing, kind of thriving population of athletes there that are learning a lot about shooting.
All right, that is awesome. And, for our viewers, you got to check it out. What's great is that here on Shot Tracker, Collin has agreed to review 20 different shooters' shots. So what we need to do is, or I should say what the ballers of the Shot Tracker community need to do is film yourselves shooting. Collin, you're going to do some analysis. Is that right?
For sure, for sure. So on any social media, so Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all you got to do is upload a video of yourself shooting. Preferably, the more shots you can get in there, the better. So a video of you shooting, and then tag Shot Tracker in it. Tag me, which is @ShotMechanics, all one word, across all platforms in it. And then use the hashtag KT3000. That's how I'll be able to find the videos. And then I'll select 20 to do a personal analysis. So I'll break down your jumper. I'll give you 2 or 3 tips that'll probably help you hit more shots pretty much immediately.
Yeah, that's going to be terrific. And for those ballers that are listening in, just take advantage of that 15 seconds or so of your jump shot. Collin is going to get right on that and do some analysis. That is awfully generous of you, Collin. Thanks so much for doing so.
No problem, no problem. And it's really, tweaking mechanics is something that can have some really, really big time results. So I tell people, and I tell kids, I tell coaches, I tell everyone, I can probably help people hit or shoot a higher percentage in 5 to 10 minutes. And a lot of old school coaches and some parents will look at me like I'm crazy and think that's impossible. You only get better by reps on reps on reps on reps. But it's just not true. A lot of times it's you're 1 or 2 minor tweaks away from shooting a higher percentage immediately. And so a shot analysis just like this is a really, really fast way to do it.
Well, great. Collin, thanks so much for your time tonight, for sharing your insights into hoops. Just a few housekeeping items for us before we sign off this evening. Again, for those that want to get their first 20 or so videos uploaded 15 seconds or so to, as Collin said, @Shot Tracker, @ShotMechanics with the hashtag of KT3000. We'll review those. Collin will give his personal analysis on those. Also, the 3 weeks of shooting wraps up on November the 22nd at 12:01 a.m. So be sure to get your shots in for that. We'll be having an awards ceremony the next Sunday. Davion's going to be back, and he's going to be hosting that. We've got a lot of exciting prizes. Just checking out our leaderboard here. Of course, the best shooter, which is a shooting percentage multiplied by the number of shots taken, wins a PlayStation.
Nice.
Yeah, at NBA 2K, so that's going to be pretty exciting. We've got the first person to 3,000 shot attempts, which is we call the sprinter. Also, they get a signed jersey. We have a number of shots like the speed shot, hot shot. We also have the best social promoter. So those that are most active online, repping the KT3000 will get a signed jersey as well. Best video for promoting the KT3000 will also be recognized. They get a signed basketball.
Oh, wow.
So
you guys aren't messing around with those prizes. Those are some legitimate prizes.
This is for real. And
we're not talking about $15 iTunes gift cards and stuff. This is legitimate stuff.
Yeah, this is for real, and it's only going to get bigger and better. So we got a great community. We got great people associated with it, like Collin Castellaw and his shot mechanics program. And you know what it's going to do is just going to make better, smarter shooters. So
For sure.
we appreciate Collin. Thanks so much for being with us tonight.
No problem. Thanks a lot for having me. Always fun to talk shooting. Thanks for everyone who decided to tune in tonight and who's shooting with their shot tracker and everything like that. I think we're living in the renaissance of shooting, and I'm happy to be at least a tiny little part of it.
Amen. With that, let's leave it at that. Collin, thanks so much. All those shot tracker balls out there, thank you so much. Davion's going to be back next week when he comes back on the North American continent from China. So we'll look forward to that. And everyone, keep on lighting it up. Thanks so much.
No problem. Thanks a lot. See you guys later.